Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Once again, bringing you a great guest. His name is Mr. Chris Yonker. And Chris is really a interesting and I would say a very knowledgeable guy when it comes to sales, helping companies grow, and on and around change in what's happening in not just the market, but the global industry of employment today. And he's a mission-driven consultant, and he helps families navigate through transition as it relates to business and their personal lives. And we're going to talk today about what most people call mindset and how it applies to sales. Now, before you go, oh, no, not mindset, right? We're going to talk about not mindset, but how mind growth and how actually, if your mind does get set, right, as a mindset, it actually limits your ability to make money. It limits your ability to sell. It actually limits everything on your life. You know, you might have heard Tony Robbins talk in the past, if you've ever listened to Tony Robbins about, your brain has a thermostat, right? And that thermostat is set at a certain degree. Well, that certain degree is your self-worth, your self-value, your self-confidence. And, every once in a while, you get a sprint in that, right? Go, hey, I deserve more. And you'll turn that thermostat, to where it needs to go. And it gives you a little bit more bandwidth to actually grow to where you want to go. You get to that place. But unfortunately, most people's thermostats, even if they are turning them up, they still have it set down at a level. And so what do? They kick it back on, air conditioner, if you will, bring down the heat, and they go back to ground zero. When you do that in sales, you'll limit the type of people that you'll actually go look for. If you have employees, they will do the same. They will look at larger accounts, for example, and go, whoa, that's too large for me. I can't get that size account. I don't have the skill sets. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the will to actually do it, right, is really where it comes down to. But believe it or not, those points of reference are really just cued in from our upbringings. We develop what I call frames, and childhood wounds fit into that frame. So we set a frame to, I would say, secure our place in what we see in life that is good for us. And a lot of those frames come from, upbringing from, mom, dad, preacher, teacher, school, principal, all the values that are instilled upon us as we grow through life. Believe it or not, we're just big kids in larger bodies, but we're still children growing through our process. And we bring those thought processes from the past into the present and actually kind of mess up our future based on what our mindset is versus mind growth. So Chris and I are going to go as deep as we can into this subject matter. He's got a lot of great information. And he's got some good stuff to help you navigate those waters and unpin where you are and to move you to where you want to go. So without further ado, let's go to our interview right now. Chris, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So those of you who are listening, Chris and I actually don't live too far from one another, where I grew up anyways. He lives in a beautiful part in Exeter, New Hampshire. Chris is a mission-driven consultant helping families transition to reach their personal and their business goals. And one of the reasons that I was so excited about bringing Chris onto the show today is he's not only an expert in transition, but he also is an expert in sales and helping companies grow their sales. And he and I had a long discussion on and around creating a subject matter for this podcast. And we're going to dive deep into the mindset and how the mindset really does affect sales. One way or another, whether you want to play with that or not, that will be your choice. But I can guarantee you that if you work on this side of what we're talking about, your sales will go up, because Chris has worked with many, many, many companies and entrepreneurs, and within companies. Chris, you've worked within 3M, if I remember correctly.
That's right. That's right.
And so let's talk about the mindset side of the sales game and the sales business, because I've always found it's usually the last thing people want to train on.
Yeah.
But it's one of the most important, out of, where I walk people through philosophy, and then, from the philosophy into the process, into the skill sets, then into the mindset. I always find the most growth within mindset. What has been your experience working within companies and sales?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, here's just a case in point to start with. How many times have you sat with a CEO, business owner, could be business size, could be a sales director, and they're like, I don't get it. Especially when in a world where maybe they built a comp plan where someone has no ceiling, right? No ceiling. And there's ability to make whatever they want. And they know that person's motivated, but it seems that even if you don't have a ceiling, they seem to hit one, right? And you're like, I don't know what's going on, like, how to get this person to produce more, or what it is. And then you start thinking about the carrot and the stick, and you get into these, is it a motivation problem? Can I give them more accolades? Or do I take things away? And but the real challenge though is that there is a you can study back to, like, you read Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. You get into some of the work, Psycho-Cybernetics, which is a great read from Maxwell Maltz from 50 years ago. He pointed out, like, you cannot outperform your own level of, basically, it's like you have a thermostat set on what you believe you're worth. And it's not like it's conscious, it's unconscious. And your self-worth is like a regulator in regards to what you produce. And if someone starts producing beyond their own self-worth, guess what happens? They sabotage. They pull back. You see behavior change. So if we're not dealing with, if that's not addressed at some point in the psychology, and it's really, we're going to talk about the psychology of the salesperson, which we're talking about now. Then there's the psychology of the person you're selling to. Like there's a few advantages. People think, psychology, I've got to manipulate. Is that what you're talking? No, it's not. I'm not going there. But I am going first as, like, what do we think and believe about ourselves, and how does that impact exactly what we believe we're worth?
And that worth determines who will approach in sales, whether or not we'll ask for the big money, whether or not, it determines everything. It determines relationships the way we have on all capacities, personal, who we pick as a spouse, etc. And I found those belief systems are formed and carried through from childhood, and a lot of childhood wounds carry through.
That's right.
And what people don't realize is, if they don't address these childhood wounds, that thermostat gets set at whatever degree it is.
Yeah.
And Chris, I know I've done this in my own life, right? Like, I remember early on in my career, I would bring my income up to $200,000. And when I got it up to $200,000, I would back it down. And I did this for almost 9 years repetitively without even thinking through it, until my daughter was born, my oldest daughter. The moment my oldest daughter was born, I for some reason, I realized, what the heck am I actually doing, right? But when I traced it back, I realized that most of my life, I grew up in a blue collar environment, and my parents did not like white collar workers. And my oldest brother, David, actually was a vice president at the time, I think, senior executive vice president for Staples. And I remember them talking about him. No, he was a yuppie, and they use all derogatory terms, right? So now here I am, a white collar worker making money. And as soon as that happened, I felt like my parents were pulling away from me and talking about me at that point. So I was downgrading my income.
Sure.
And I had to have a conversation with myself when my daughter came along. Is she going to have the life I had, or give the life that I want? And I actually had to seek help. And I was able to break that. As soon as I did, bam, my income went up from 200 grand to 350 the following year, then went up to 500, and so on in sales. So these belief levels are extremely helpful to us, but they're also triggers that will impede our growth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the first we got to address is our self-esteem, self-worth. And for folks listening in, if you are in sales, let's say you're listening to the show, I just ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your level of self-worth? What's your level of self-esteem? And if it's not at an 8 or above, then get together with someone and and figure that out, work on that. Either a therapist, a good coach, someone who can help, because you won't be able to outregulate that. And so can we talk about another illustration related to this topic? I got a story I'd love to share. Okay. I mean, you're driving the bus and I feel like I'm taking control, but then isn't that what good salespeople do?
You got to have a pilot and a co-pilot, right? I mean, you can't.
That's right. That's right. So trapped. So there's a period of time at 3M where we had a sales force across the country. And part of my role was to mentor and train and work with our personnel and just help them. Even though they had a management team, it's just to really mentor them and help them to be better at what they do. And so it was a cool gig because I had a lot of autonomy. I could pick kind of where I go, and I would pick, I admit I would pick people that I thought would be fun to work with in cities I wanted to visit, and times I'd bring my wife along. So we made it a fun trip. And there was a time I was in Pennsylvania, which was not a top place I wanted to go, but I went because this person needed some help regardless. We're in the car. We're going to go into the sales meeting. And we would, you go in a game plan, right? Okay, who are we calling on? Why are we calling on them? What are we looking to accomplish? What are the goals, right? What's the mission here? So when I was a very consultative sales methodology guy, right? Like we're going to be advocate for our clients. We're going to work with their best interest. That was my philosophy, right? We're not here just to push our goods, load them up and move on. We're looking for long-term relationships where we can really help someone. So we agreed what we're going to do and what he's going to do when we go into the call. And so we're going to call, meet with the customer, and I'm standing there and I'm watching. And it was just like we never had a conversation in the car. Okay. Like I'm like, all right. I like Doug, I was like, what just happened? And I'm watching, and this whole conversation just hard turn right, go somewhere else, never even discuss what we came in there to discuss, ended up somewhere else completely. I really wanted to insert myself, but I didn't. And it's a hard thing to do. And for those coaching folks, you gotta let them, as you know, Doug, you gotta let them learn from their mistakes. If you're a sales manager or a CEO and you're stepping in and you're constantly rescuing your people, they're never going to get better. Right. So we get in the car and I'm like, dude, what just happened? Like, he's like, what? I'm like, what? I'm like, we talked about A, B, and C, and then you went in there on X, Y, and Z. And he starts, and so here's what happened. He started going into the story of why, which wasn't the reality. Typically, when we ask someone a question, even like in sales, and you ask someone like why they're not going to buy or whatever, it's a story. It's not typically the truth. It's what they want to. We do is in life is we manufacture a construct on why we think or don't think something is or isn't, and we have to buy it first before we sell it to someone else as our reason, right? So he's telling me his rationale, and then I stopped him and I said, let me ask you a question. There's something you're afraid of in there. Like there's something going on in your psychology. Just play with me here. I said, there's something you're avoiding. Tell me, what were you afraid of in there? What were you afraid of? And he says, well, I don't want to be pushy. I was afraid of being pushy. So I didn't want to be pushy. So, that's where my head was at. And so here's the problem. And this is a common paradigm. And because, who wants to be pushy? Right. I used to play a game in the sales training class where we would do like the $10,000 pyramid, where someone would have a card and then you'd have to describe what's on that card without saying the word, like certain words in the word, you know what I mean, dude? And then someone would have to guess it. And one of the cards would end up being salesperson. And then they would go into like sleazy, smarmy, underhanded. This is sales training, right? These are new salespeople, right? But they're going through paradigms to get the other person to guess. No, who wants to be that person? Nobody does. But my point is that you can't be one thing with the energy and mindset of trying not to be something else.
Yeah.
And so like he was in an avoidance psychology. And so what we had to work on was like, all right, let's focus on who and how you do want to be. Because the fact of the matter is when it comes to sales, conviction is critical. And the person with the most conviction is going to win the sale, right?
I do. I mean, in a sale, you have two people, sometimes more than two people. actually going through this process, and the stronger frame will usually win.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to believe and say, well, what do we need to believe in? We need to believe in ourselves. We need to believe in the product or service that we're selling. We need to believe in what the solution provides to the client. And we also need to believe in what's best for the client and their best interest. Like we have to check all those boxes, right? And the only way we can do that is we understand the scenario and we give a shit about the scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yeah,
that's,
well, I think of it, Chris, if we don't have our self-belief in alignment, that's when most people will play win-lose in sales.
yeah.
So if that belief is so strong that it's like, okay, this isn't right for the client, and my belief is I'm going to play win-win regardless, then they'll disengage from the sale, and there won't be a bad client. Bad clients to me have always been bad sales decisions on the front end. Right. So if somebody's got their belief level at a certain level, and as you said, that thermostat is set at that level, unless they adjust that level, the sale is going to go just like, I would call it the scatomic sale that actually you witnessed, right? Where the person wasn't even realizing what they were doing. And they had the pre-brief call with you. Okay, we got the game plan. And it's kind of like, the quarterback goes in for the hike, and the guy who hikes the ball throws it over his head every single time because he doesn't believe he wants to hurt the quarterback's hands, right? It's one of those type of issues. So what do people do about this? Like, I can imagine people are listening right now going, okay, that's me, or that's somebody on my team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do they do about it?
Yeah. Well, so it goes to like, okay, if we can't be one thing while trying not to be something else, then where do we put the energy and the effort? We put the energy and the effort into building a construct on who and how we want to be. Mm-hmm. So if we believe enough in ourselves, and then we can check the box, and let's assume that you believe enough in the company you work for and the product and service you're selling. Because if you don't, that's a huge problem. But let's assume that you do, which most people do. Then the next piece is like, okay, well then I've got to figure out how am I going to show up on in my sales conversations and in my meetings. And it's not from a sake of neediness. If you're in a sake of neediness and trying to accomplish and hit your number and your goal, that's another place where you don't want to come from. You need to always come from what's the better interest of the person you're selling to, period. Because if you can become an advocate for them, if you have their best interest in mind, if you care enough about them as a person and what they're trying to accomplish in their business, their life, however that looks, you'll do great. And when I would walk in, when they trained us at 3M, we got all these, I was in construction home improvement markets. And so we were calling on hardware stores, lumber yards, mass accounts, home centers, things like that. And some of them, had owners, some of them just had buyers and buying departments. And the people in my trade, what they would do is they would get these sample bags full of freaking products, and they would go in and then walk into the door of the customer, what you got? And then be like, oh, I'm with 3M, and let me show you our greatest technology. And I'm just going to, show you all the advantages and benefits of these products and go freaking crazy. And it was ridiculous. And I'm like, so I was like, first off, I'm like, we're not going to walk in with anything except a notepad. We're not walking in with that shit. And at the time, the sales training, that's what they're telling people to do. You need to walk in and show them, wow them with the products. I'm like, well, what does the customer care about? They cared about making money. They care about improving revenue, reducing expenses, and minimizing risk. Those are the three things business owners care about: increasing revenue, reducing expenses, minimizing risk. Write it down. Those are the three things. If you're a CEO listening, you're not going to argue the point. Like, these are the three things that you care about. So my goal is to figure out, how can I help you do those things with the solutions I provide? That was my philosophy. Let's figure out how we can improve margin. Let's figure out how we're going to improve turns. Let's figure out how we're going to manage inventory. I'm changing the construct of the conversation. I'm now consulting you on how to be a better manager of a product, of a set of product line, instead of the newest, greatest technology that we have that's so awesome, everyone needs to have it. And because our lab says so, let me tell you what they have to say. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. I had a gentleman approach me, and you'll probably appreciate this story. He borrowed over almost $14 million for his company.
To buy it?
No, just to start the company. Was it
okay?
A technology business, and
okay, like seed money. Okay.
Yeah, seed money.
Yeah.
And so hey, he's a good sales guy, right? I mean,
yeah. So someone to give him money, 14 million.
4 years later, his company's still under 700,000 in revenue, and he can't figure out why, and his salespeople aren't performing.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had the conversation that you and I are just having right now together, and he was so reluctant to make any changes. He's still at that place. His number one fear was, I'm worried I'm going to get displaced out of my own company by the board and the investors. Yeah, no kidding.
Sounds like a real fear. Yeah. Yeah.
And with high probability, that's going to happen. So the solution presents itself. And, the solution is the sales team's not performing. They're not going to, I assess the situation, and he doesn't want to make the adjustments because he wants to stay in the safety bubble of him being in control. So in that case, you can't help that person that won't move from point A to point B. Yeah. So for the people who want to move from point A to point B, because, well, let me do a little plug right now. We're talking to Chris Yonker from chrisyonker.com. Chris and I are talking about what I would call mindset shift to mindset growth, and how it relates to sales, and how it will actually be the block of you actually getting from point A to point B in your sales growth, or point A to B to C. And I love what you're bringing up. Look, there's only a few things, Chris, that the CEO is really interested in, and it's professional ROI on that side. And then there might be some personal ROI that's attached to it. Hey, if I have higher profits, I have a more stable company. If I have a more stable company, I have a more stable family potential life, can do more for my kids, take them to, and I feel as the CEO and dad, I feel amazing, right? So there's some personal ROI in there. So I know, I talk to people about this all the time, and just like you're explaining scenarios. I have one gentleman, his name is Chris, not you, but another Chris. He went from $140,000 a year in commissions to $2.1 million just with us working on the mind of the process. Yeah, he had all the skill sets, right? And the interesting thing is, after we disengaged, a couple of years later, he started regressing back into his old patterns again. So his income fell, and as a result, he had stress in his marital relationship, and that actually fell as well down the line. So how do people create permanent change, I guess, would be my question, to you as the expert.
It's a good question. The first order of business for anybody is getting clear on what you want. Kind of like you said, like, what are the big picture drivers for your life? Mm-hmm. I think that's the first essence. In fact, a whole different conversation, but we don't have time for today, but I built out a process around this. It's called the 3-step compass process, because in the work that I do with either succession or transition, even working with salespeople, it always starts with, what are we trying to create? What do you want your life to look like? Like, what do you want your family life? Because the cool thing about sales is you can make a lot of money and you can leverage your time. Mm-hmm. It's like being a business owner in many aspects, right? The best salespeople are entrepreneurs, I believe, in mindset. But we have to have clarity in what we're trying to create. Do you want to go on vacation once a quarter with your family? What's that going to require? Do you want to have a second home? Do you want to put your kid in private school, or kids in private school? All these things, right? Like, what are the context of all this, and why does that matter, and why is it important to you? Because at the end of the day, the times are going to be difficult, and when things are difficult, you're going to need something to keep you going, right? It's got to be something big enough to keep you in the hunt and on the go. So that I think that the first element is, what are you trying to create? And in the process, the 3-step compass process, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to even share our workbook with them. And we have an online program, but regardless, it's what are we trying to create and why, and why is really important. So that's the first order of business in that relationship. Once I have clarity in that, then now it's a matter of, okay, well, then let's architect it. Let's figure it out. And I think you say about the interesting question, like, how do I get permanent behavior change? In the process, we're going to identify what are some of the beliefs that you have that are holding you back. Is it beliefs about yourself, beliefs around product, beliefs around, the two biggest limiting beliefs. Okay. I studied NLP. My NLP trainer mentored Tony Robbins. One of the things he taught me was there's two limiting beliefs. One is belief in ourselves. The second one is in belief in what's possible. Go over those two different beliefs and get over them, right? Like, okay, what if I can believe more in myself? If I can believe more in what's possible, right? It's like you just mentioned, like, hey, I work with this person, they're at X, they went to a couple $1 million, like huge increases. Well, that, these stories, Doug, they, as you know, they create evidence
Right.
If someone can do something, so can I, right? Like you can't deny that there's possibility for someone to do something. So that's the key element. And then you say, okay, well then you want to learn the strategies. And quite frankly, dude, I know this is a plug for you or for whoever in our realm. You need a coach. You really, I do work with a 7-figure salespeople that own their own businesses, but they're in sales, like financial advisors.
Mm-hmm.
That they're very high producers, top couple percent of their field, and I work with them, and I work with them closely for years over year over year over year. And you say why? Like, dude, like Nadal's on. Like, I'm a tennis guy. Rafi Nadal's playing right now this morning, and he beat Djokovic in the last round in the French Open. And do you think he's got a coach? Right? Like, seriously, right? Come on. Right? The Celtics won last night. Did they have a coach? Okay. And these people are the best of what they freaking do. They're the best, and they still have a coach. So it kind of baffles me. I have a person I pay for strategy. I have another person I pay for mindset. I've got 2 people working with me.
Yep.
And then I've got a personal trainer for health and wellness. I got 3 people that I'm putting money out to for myself. And I've been doing that for years. And I don't blink an eye.
It's part of the success process. And people, well, if they don't have the belief in themselves, Chris, then they're not willing to invest in themselves, number one. Right.
That's
so
a
I
good
think
point.
that's where I think a lot of people run into a challenge. Like, I have a coach, I pay this guy somewhere around $26,000 a year to coach me.
Yeah.
Right. Every year I've been with this gentleman, my business has gone up 22% on average every year over year growth. So I'm on my 3rd year with him, and I can measure the numbers, 22%. I'm already at 22% growth this year, projected out to even be higher. So when you look at the $26,000 and you go, oh my gosh, because there are people that are going to go, what are you, crazy? You pay $26,000 for a coach, right? When you look at that, and that's just one coach, right? So like you said, Chris, we have multiple coaches. If you're going to be $1 million plus producer, it's unlikely you're going to get there on your own frames.
Get that right.
Right? Because our frames are going to hold us. Like, I've talked to people that say, I can't make $1 million. That's taking too much. Right? And so my response is, let's change your frame, because you got a picture frame that looks like, okay, I'm a taker. What if we took that and said, what's your bottom baseline? Like you said, Chris, their authentic self. What do they really, really want? Right? Maybe it's $400,000 a year and they see themselves living a great quality life. I say, okay, we'll take that other 400, you get the 400, take the other 600 and give it away.
Yeah.
Give it to charities.
Yeah.
And make $5 million, keep 400,000, give away the remainder. Now you're no longer a taker. You're a giver.
Yeah.
Right. And inevitably it gets in their brain and they go, I don't want to give that much away. Oh, so yourself is worth more. So now let's figure it out. Right. So what I love about what you do is you get to I would say, the head and the heart of the matter on everything that you do. And it all relates into, how do you grow? How do you grow in a business way? How do you grow in a personal way? And for me, you also specialize in an area that a lot of people don't realize is part of the mind, change, right? So, somebody once said to me, there are 2 things that are guaranteed in life: death and taxes. And then I heard someone else say, no, across the room, there's also the 3rd. And they go, well, what's that? And they go, change.
Yeah.
You will not get rid of death, taxes, or change in your life. So these are the things that you embrace, people. So I would give high recommendation to people to heed your advice. Get a coach. Work with a guy like yourself.
What's your philosophy on someone's listening in and they have a business and they have a sales team?
Yep.
And they go like, okay, well, what if I invested in them? Do I hire someone to work with them and work on their mindset, their psychology, help them build out some goals, and help us grow another 10 to 20% beyond what we've been able to do on our own? And but then, and then the other side of that as well, gee, but if they're not paying for it themselves, are they going to value it, or am I going to get the return on that? How would you answer for the first person out there listening in? How would you answer that question?
First question I would ask him would be, what's the outcome? What is the purpose that we're doing this? Is it for you? Is it for them? Is it for both of you? Right?
Yeah.
Because if some people truly don't want training, right? they're not trainable.
Yeah.
Really, when it comes down to that. So I would say, what's the outcome you want? And then let's assess the situation. What is causing that outcome from not happening? Is it mindset? Is it process? What is it? Is it you, ma'am or sir, right? As the leader of the company? What is the real issue? Because, I had somebody say that to me one time, Chris, and he had a $48 million company at the time. And I had to go back and tell him it was him, right? And he's like, well, I don't understand. I'm like, he had an 82% turnover of his employee base every year.
Wow.
It's like,
yeah.
And they would all tell me the reasons why. So yes. I would go to that first. Then once all of that settled, then whether or not the owner is investing or the person is investing really comes back down to what are the personal goals of the people. I have had people within companies actually invest in their own training because they see that as a way out. Now, what I would generally do is, if I structured it that way, is they make it up in quota volume, or they make it up in X, they would get bonused and they would get their money back.
Sure.
Right. So it's playing win-win. The business is winning, the individual is winning. But especially in today's environment, if we're not investing in the people within our company in some capacity, they're likely not to stay there, because it's shifted now from money to quality of life.
That's right.
Right. So
yes.
And it's not going back in my estimation.
No. And I totally agree on that. And that's, if I'm out there listening, I would challenge you to think about, not you, but the person listening, is how can I help my people realize the quality of life that they want by working for me? And you can only answer that question if you know what they're looking for. And I'll say to business owners, often the people who work for us care, they care. There's three things on their mind. They want to know, can I trust you? They want to know, do you care about me? And they want to know, can you get me to where I want to go? And you can only help someone get to where they want to go if you know where the hell they want to go. Have you asked? Have you figured it out? And if you think about that, say, well, I'm not getting the most of my people. Like, well, how do you help them get to the quality of life that they're just saying, well, it's not my job. Well, okay. Well, I'm not saying it's their job too. It's both our jobs, but we need to create the environment for that to become an outcome and help develop them. And I think we're in an age right now where if you are not investing in your people and creating, because it's going to help with the retention, it's going to help with the productivity. It's going to, I can go on and on and on what it's going to help with. People want to, most people, at least the people you want to employ, are growth directed. And that's, who you and I cater to, right, Doug? Right. If someone's not growth directed, they're not freaking listening to this show. Let's just call it what it is. They're not here. And that's fine. So the people who are here, then if you're growth directed, then invest in your people. And I would argue that sales is probably a place that that is probably underserved in many companies. And quite frankly, it's the one place you're going to invest. You're going to get the biggest return. Right. Outside of organizational health, you add strategy, organizational health, but what are you doing improving sales process? Right.
I think you had mentioned your NLP master trainer that trained you, who trained Tony Robbins. And when I worked with Tony, he would always talk about investing in people. Right? He would play the philosophy we were talking about right now. And, Tony is a human being, and, he's made mistakes along the way, and he would say that as well. Right. But the reality is, by investing in people, and in the divisions that I worked and ran, we did invest back in people. My gosh, we trained our sales teams, 5 days a week, many times, between 3 and 5 days. That is a cost to the company.
Yes.
But if you're investing in the right things, and if you're an individual and you're trying to get there, reach out to Chris, because if you want to get there, or you're a company and you want to get your people there, reach out to Chris, because if you don't fix these triggers and you don't invest in your people, and today more than ever with the quality of life, I think part of it was the pandemic that shifted it, Chris, because people got disassociated from one another. And now they're looking also at relationship as a component. If we are employers and we're not looking at these components as well, then our people are not going to stay around. And I mean, you can see it right now. People will tell you in almost every industry, healthcare, especially right now, they're clamoring for quality help, because people are just like, listen, I'm not going to work these kind of hours. I'm not going to be under this kind of stress. I'm not going to do this. Right. And so, even getting a medical assistant today, never mind a physician, is difficult for companies. So what you're bringing forth is just, I think, kind of the crux of the mind growth side of the business, right? If we're a business owner and our brains are limited at a thermostat saying, it's not my responsibility, as you were alluding to, business owners would think, and I've run across that many times, I would challenge them back now and say, yeah, is it? Do you want a company to be around long? I mean, because it's like, you might say your wife's happiness is not your responsibility if you're a male and own the company and you're married to a woman, but is it really not part of your responsibility, right? Because you won't be married long, or in a happy marriage. And it's really no different than personal life into the business life today. They've kind of merged. That's been my understanding. And so work with a master like yourself who understands how to grow not just the business, but the people within the business. And help them transition that change. And that's what I love about what you do. Chris, I could stay and talk with you all day here, but I know you got other things to do too. And I'm really grateful you're on this podcast and we're having this conversation. How do people get a hold of you? Like, I'll put it all in the show notes.
Yeah, right on. They can reach out to me through LinkedIn, Chris@chrisyonker.com, CHRIS. That's the best way to, you can go to our website, and there's additional resources there as well. And then we also have a podcast called The Secret Thoughts of CEOs. So that's the other place you can hit up.
Check it out, folks. He's the real deal. Chris and I have had several conversations now on and around subject matter like this. And hey, he doesn't live too far from my hometown. So we always support the hometown people as well. So Chris, I really appreciate you being here on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, sharing all of your knowledge in such a short period of time that we've had here. I'd love to have you back on a future show if you'd like to come.
That'd be great. Thanks, Doug.
So to all of you listening, have a great rest of your day, and take notes and re-listen to this. And Chris brought forward a lot of wisdom here. So Chris, thanks again for being here. So self-worth, self-value, self-confidence, and where we set our thermostat number at really determines what we want in life. And, as Chris was saying, we have this perception first, right? And then we have this behavior that we display. And sometimes that perception of who we are really isn't who we are. It's who we live to be. And that gets us in trouble as human beings, because we go, geez, you know what? I want more, but we're not willing to move past that point due to the fact that we have our set point in the mind, and we've got to grow past that. And how do you grow past that? Coaching. Go get to people who know what they're doing, work with them, and you move through that process. Or if you're in Europe or Canada listening to this, or South Africa, process, right? Move through the process of how you get there. And it's not that hard. Sometimes it's a little bit scary, because sometimes you got to face the reality, but the reality is that if you don't move forward, you will stay stuck. And if you stay stuck, sometimes you kind of regress. You get people in there, as they start to age, they go, well, they're set in their ways. Well, guess what? The universe and the economy and everything that is around us doesn't stay set in its ways. It's constantly changing and evolving, whether it goes down or up. But if we're stuck in our place and we don't respond to those points, we don't just stay stuck, we regress, we start going back. And this is why a lot of people in an economy that's getting inflated are going, my God, I can't afford this. Because they're still staying at the same income levels, because they're not sure how to move past that point. So they're stuck, and all of a sudden inflation's eating away. But in sales in particular, we know what do? If we need more money, we go out and we sell more stuff. But if our mind is saying, no, that's not it, we can't do that. So let's say our mind, you grew up in an environment that says, if you do that, you are a taker. And takers are not respected here in this family. They're not respected. It's basically getting kicked out of the clan if you go do it. Well, how do we shift that from taker to giver? That is the key. How do we move that thermostat, that number, up or down to where you really want your life to be? And that was a key critical component that Chris gave you that piece of information. Start where you want to be, right? Get clear on that point, because then you become your authentic self. When you're in that place, I can tell you from a position of strength, you say no to things you're supposed to, and you say yes to things that you're supposed to, versus either saying yes to everything or no because you're in a fear state. So as always, if you want some subject matter on this podcast, because this podcast is for you, I'm the facilitator, let us know. Reach out to me at Doug at ceosalesstrategies.com. Doug Brown 123, LinkedIn is my handle, or give us a call at 603-595-0303 and say, hey, I want to have a podcast done on this subject matter. We'll find the people, we'll find the experts. That isn't the hard part for us. The hard part is understanding what people want. And how do you get to understand what people want? You ask, just as I'm doing now. If you want help with your business on the mind growth, the mindset side of the business, reach out to Chris. He's very highly qualified and skilled in doing so. If you want help in growing and scaling your teams of people, or you want to have your teams of people get into the top 1% of their revenue potential and the sales globally for your industry, reach out to me. If you're an individual, reach out to me. That's what I train people on. How do you become in the top 1%? Also, how do you hire, find, hire, train, manage, and retain those type of people, what I call elite producers. A lot of people will call them top producers. I disagree with that statement. I think a top producer is part of an elite sales producer. And so those people in the 1% consistently have traits and commonalities. And once you understand how to find them, it's not like finding Bigfoot, but it is finding maybe a moose in the woods at times, right? You got to know how to go and look and find where that moose is, and you'll see more of them. This is what you do with elite producers. But if you want any help on and around those two subject matters, I'm your guy. Reach out to me at Doug at ceosalesstrategies.com. The phone number again, 603-595-0303, or Doug Brown 123, LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to help you with that specific subject matter that you're looking for. Once again, go out, make it a great day, sell a lot, sell it profitably, understand your authentic self, move your life in that direction, build your life first, build your business around that second. Go out and make it a great day and help a lot of people to your success. Thanks for being here on the CEO Sales Strategy Podcast. This is Doug Brown signing off on another episode just for you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.